You are now listening to the Real Table Podcast with Michael Carter.
Welcome back to another episode of the Real Table Podcast with your host, Michael Carter. And I'm a little intrigued about today's episode. But beyond that, before we get into another new Marvel movie, I've got a new person on this podcast, and I've been excited about it. He's in one of my movie chats where we talk about superheroes, movies, and all that other stuff. But I've been wanting to get him on for a long time, and he ended up going to see the movie this past weekend like me, and I was like, this is the perfect chance to have him on here. And so I asked him, and he said, yeah, I can do it. And I said, let's go. So I have with me my good friend Joe Krebs. Joe, what's happening, man?
Michael, great to be with you, my friend.
This is awesome. I love it. I love it. I love having new people on. All right, go ahead and tell people. Go ahead and tell the people about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Joe Krebs. I got roped into not roped in. That makes it sound worse than it is. But I got invited to be a part of text chat with Michael, and Michael and I used to be coworkers and met through that. And I'm originally from the Detroit area and moved down to Northwest Ohio. And Michael was actually, when I moved, my wife and I didn't really know anybody in the area. Michael was one of the first people to invite me out to lunch, and we recognized we had a lot of common interests, whether that was sports or movies or superheroes. And so we started just geeking out on all kinds of different things. And that's what led me here today.
Dude, I never knew that I was one of the first people. I never knew that.
Yeah, it was pretty early on. Yeah.
That's super cool to know. Like, I remember like, hey, let's go get lunch and stuff. But to be one of the first people, that's so sweet. That's awesome, dude. What are some of your favorite movies, Joe?
My favorite all-time movie is Remember the Titans. So it's got that combo of sports and inspiration, motivation. Really enjoy all the different tones and themes in that movie, and just so many quotable lines from that movie that just get you revved up when you think about them. And that's my favorite movie. Some of my others, I love Interstellar. I love Inception, a couple Nolan films. I really enjoyed it when we're talking superhero movies. Endgame's up at the top. One of my other favorites, a little like sneaky favorite of mine that I don't think is as high on others' list, but Civil War is one of my favorite MCU movies, partially because of the introduction of Spider-Man. Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. I grew up reading X-Men and Spider-Man comics. Were the first comics I ever read when I was, I think, in middle school, and got into the graphic novels that had like the first 10 issues of Spider-Man ever, and then it was like 11 through 20, and so I read like so many of those through X-Men, Spider-Man, and so I really enjoyed the Spider-Man films. The MCU Spider-Man films are great.
Yeah. Who's your favorite Spider-Man?
Ooh, that's a great question. I actually like all of them for different reasons. I think Andrew Garfield is the best as Spider-Man, as far as him being quippy and the way that he presented himself. And I think I would actually prefer Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, but I feel like Tom Holland is like best of both worlds. Yeah. Like has characteristics of both of them together that I really enjoy. And so they're all great in their own way. Yeah. Tom Holland has done a great job, especially having to follow two other people. He's done really well.
Yeah. Out of those, do you have like a favorite Spider-Man movie as well?
That's a really good question. Spider-Man 2, the original Spider-Man 2 was my favorite superhero movie for a long time. And that's that was up there, like that and The Dark Knight were like my two, like they duked it out for my top slot for a long time until the MCU really got cooking. Yeah. And No Way Home was so much fun getting to see all those different elements. I still would maybe say Spider-Man 2 is my favorite of all time. Probably for nostalgia purposes, along with me still enjoying the movie.
And it holds up really well. Like I watched Blade last week for the first time, the original one. And for it being a 98 movie, it held up so well. And I thought about it, like a lot of those movies back in the day, they like, I mean, some of them, they have like the dialogue is old and it feels old, and like the graphics and the cinematography in a sense, but the story and the actual like everything about it is like, man, these movies held up really well. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think these movies have, some of them, some movies don't age well, but I feel like Spider-Man 2, the Blades, like those hold up so well. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And Blade it's such an interesting, because they had the whole landscape of superheroes to go with, and for them to
Yeah.
run with Blade so early on was, I guess, an interesting choice. And maybe it's because there wasn't a ton to compare it to. Yes, there were superhero
Mm,
films, but as far as that era of
yeah.
that like late 90s of them like starting to embark in some of those different superhero films like that, maybe because there wasn't so much to compare it to and to try to live up to, maybe
Mm,
that allowed for more of a blank canvas and more creativity in that sense.
yeah. Wow. I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're completely right. Fresh era, nothing that, again, unless it's comics or anything to do with the comics and maybe something like the old cartoon TV shows, there really wasn't anything to compare it to. So that's very valid. Very good point. Very good point. Um, all right, man, let's do this. Let's get into it. Captain America, Brave New World. This is the fourth Captain America film, right? Fourth?
Yeah, four.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Wow. Finally got to four. Um, First off, before we actually get into the movie itself, um, post Endgame, I've had this conversation. We've talked about this conversation in the chat many times, but it's just nice to get your opinion out there um, here on the podcast. But like, how do you feel right now post Endgame? What are your thoughts been post Endgame right now?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and I'd be interested to hear your take on a couple things I've been processing and thinking through even since seeing the movie
Mm,
this past weekend.
yeah, for
But
sure.
I think I would start by saying they did such a great job up through Endgame, those initial phases that they did, that with me, they had earned enough trust, enough equity, like Feige and the team, like you
Mm,
go do whatever you want
yep.
because you have just delivered on every level. You made it bigger and you created higher and higher stakes and you just kept delivering and you kept creating and producing a great product. And so they had total equity with me to try whatever they wanted. And I remember, because this was right around when COVID was hitting too, like I remember when WandaVision came out, and I remember all these
Mm,
Disney Plus shows are coming out. They have the movies, and we're all just
yeah.
itching to know what's next, what's coming after Endgame, who's the
Yep.
next big bad, what's the
Yep.
next big thing. And part of that, I think, is because they had conditioned us up through Endgame. Like they gave us, even if you looked at just phase one up to the first Avengers movie, they dangled that carrot. They made it very clear. Here's the goal. Here's where we're heading. We're going to make an Avengers movie. We're going to introduce these characters separately and then bring them together. And
Yep.
then in post credit, mid credit scenes, they were able to start teasing all those projects, and you started seeing movie to movie it build towards that. And so I think that really helped get people to buy into the concept and like got people more bought into the characters because
Yeah.
they knew this is ultimately leading to something bigger. And then we get these little pieces of the puzzle in each movie or the next post credit scene. And then once they got done with Avengers and they introduced Thanos, then it's like, okay, here's the next big goal that we're heading
Right.
toward on a way larger scale. They're introducing more characters. They're
Yeah.
teasing all the different stones. And so there's all these different things that people are interested in, like where are the stones located, what are they, like people I remember they're like, oh, I think the stones follow this acronym
Yeah.
of scepter or whatever it was, and that must mean that the soul stone is wherever, and
Yeah.
it's which I don't think anybody was right on where the
No.
soul stone was, but so they dangled out the big goal, like we know where we're heading, we're all bought in, we're all in that storyline. And so the interesting thing post Endgame, like yes, they had built up trust and equity to do what they wanted and go and experiment. And I'm all for them trying new things at that point. But what they did is they waited a really long time to give us any clear
Mm,
direction on where
mm,
we were heading. I
mm.
think it was probably 2.5 years before they finally at Comic-Con, or was it the D23, where they said, hey, it's Kang. Kang
Yep.
is
Yep.
the big bad. It's going to lead to um, I forget if they had said Secret Wars at that point, but they had said like this is going to be the next, or it was the two Kang movies they were going to do. They were going to do the Kang related films, the
Yep.
big ones, and before all the major stuff went down. And so they finally told us, and then so they took a really long time So that's like back to WandaVision. Everybody's like itching to know what's our next big goal, what's our next big bad, what's the next big thing we're going to start building towards, because we want to just start buying into that next huge, large scale storyline. So they didn't give us that. And then in the meantime, they introduced like 24 new characters to us, and all these different movies, and some of them, like they did a good job. Like they're not bad characters. The movies weren't terrible. Definitely a lot of like all over the place as far as some mid projects, some decent projects. But they introduced all these characters. They introduced all these post-credit scenes that are leading to somewhere, and then they never gave us any payoff to any of them for such a long time. Like I'm still wondering what's going to happen post. Like there's that Shang-Chi post-credit scene where like Captain Marvel, I think Bruce Banner shows up, and it's like, oh, Wong is there all of a sudden. It's like, okay, something's going on there. It's been what, 3 years since that movie came out? Or it's been 4 years almost, and we know nothing about it. And so so some of that formula that I think worked so well in those initial phases, they went away from, and they're trying some new things. And I think that's where they lost some of that buy-in and that momentum of people. And then on top of that, I think just the more that you produce high level content, and the more that you introduce new concepts that we haven't seen in a superhero movie, the less that you have to choose from in the future. And so now it's even forecasting ahead. It's we've already seen all the heroes come together and do a giant battle. We've already seen different team ups. We've already seen all these unique scenarios that they're actually like running out of ways to do it in a new creative way in the future, which I think makes some films that in the past we were probably been like, oh, that was actually a really good superhero movie. Now we're like, it was kind of underwhelming because we've seen so many of the concepts before. Those are some of my overarching thoughts when it comes to post Endgame, where we find ourselves today.
Yeah. Wow. Beautifully articulated, man. And I'm right there with you. And I think, like even after this one, as we get into it, like this is not a spoiler, but I can just tell you about, like, for me, kind of disappointed with that post-credit scene. I think I told some people when I talked to them about it, I don't even think, I know they did some reshootings and stuff like that, but since they decided to pivot, I don't even know if they did a new, like they reshot that scene. I think they decided to keep the scene, which is interesting, which makes me go, okay, how does this tie in to what we're supposed to be going towards? And yeah, basically just sums up the MCU right now. And even though there is some variety, where I've talked to some people who have appreciated the variety in storytelling and you know, and filmmaking and the characters and stuff, that like they've liked some of this stuff, all of the multiverse saga. But I think we can all agree, and like obviously me and you can definitely agree on that it's fallen definitely short. And I'm not sure how to feel as we look to 2026, look to Doomsday, and like how that's gonna really fall into place with all these movies and all these post-credit scenes that seem to be unfinished and all that stuff. But good to hear your thoughts on MCU and where we are. I think we'll eventually circle back to that, because obviously we're talking Captain America: Brave New World, which is basically, I don't know if this is part of a new phase. See, I think this is exactly my point right now. When it comes to level of like keeping up and knowing what's going on, it's like, I don't know if this is a new phase or not. But this is their first movie since Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they pushed, like, for people who don't remember this, they delayed a lot of their slate. They delayed this movie, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, and even the Avengers movies. And I think a lot of that had to do with the writer's strike and the actor's strike. But also, I think they realized that they needed more time. The feedback has been ringing loud. There's been Hollywood Report articles. Like, these things are like, it's real, it's out there, and it's just like, it's evident. And so I feel like they wanted to push things back and let things kind of air and breathe a little more, to maybe put out a better cohesive storytelling.
You asked for me. Here I am. You want to help me? Is there anything you remember?
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Thaddeus Ross.
Whatever this is, Cap, be careful. What do we know?
There were 5 shooters. This was a coordinated terrorist attack, sir.
I was a wartime general. Now I'm a wartime president. Your inner circle's been compromised. Let me fix it. Watch yourself. You're not Steve Rogers. You're right. I'm not. Wait for it. We're on the brink of war. I can't trust anyone. Nothing about this feels right.
Captain America. You ever ask yourself, who's playing who?
Someone's been pulling the strings on everything.
You're under arrest?
I don't want a variable out there that I can't control.
Stop!
Captain America caught without his wings.
You like to play dress up and blindly execute the state's orders.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
What if this is a trap?
You don't even know what this is.
Since when were they red?
You want me? Come and get me!
But Captain America: Brave New World, directed by Julius Ona, obviously stars Anthony Mackie, Danny Ramirez, Giancarlo Esposito, Harrison Ford, Tim Blake Nelson. What are your without getting into detail? How did you feel after Captain America: Brave New World?
Yeah, it was great to be back in the theater watching MCU content. Like, that was a really good feeling because Deadpool did, yes, it was MCU, but it lived in its own corner of the MCU. I didn't view that as, I didn't walk in expecting that to move any of our, I guess, main storyline forward at all. And so this was the first time in a long time where it's I'm in the theater, we're watching MCU content. It's going to move the storyline forward. So that was a really good feeling with all of that. And I had a lot of expectation because of reasons that you alluded to, because it's as much as Disney and Marvel, like they tried so many new things, and who could blame them, because they had everybody in the palm of their hand back in 2019, 2020. So sure. I can see why they're like, well, let's just make as many Disney Plus shows as we can because everyone's going to watch them. And at least I did. I watched the first 8, every single episode, right the day they came out. And but then they realized, like you said, they got that feedback that we want more quality over quantity. We want these to be maybe paced out a little more than what we're getting. We're actually getting a little overloaded and oversaturated with the content, which who would have thought that was possible back in 2019, but that's where we found ourselves. And so the good news is it seemed like, and they were aided a little, not aided, but they dealt with the writer's strike, but they dealt with some natural delays when it came to everything. And the pandemic in general created a lot of issues with timelines and just so many movies getting shifted and the release timelines getting bumped. But they got the feedback and they decided, okay, we do need to reevaluate our process. And so that overall had me excited because, okay, they're reevaluating, they're going to get back together. They're going to put their heads together and figure out what's a good solution for this next phase of films moving forward. And so I was excited knowing that we were basically taking last year off, and then we're doing 3 films this year, which 3-4, I guess, was pretty typical before, but we're getting 3 films that have had a lot of time to be reviewed and for the scripts and for whatever they had filmed at that up to that point to be reviewed. And then so many reports came out about the reshoots they were doing, which sometimes makes you skeptical, but I thought that was a good thing of, okay, they've done this reevaluating process and now they're really wanting to make sure that the movie makes sense. So coming into the theater, for me, this probably held more pressure than maybe it deserved, because I was really coming in hoping for a knockout to really set the tone for this next phase of films after that whole reevaluation process, after taking the time to figure out what ingredients do we need to put back in place to create that high quality content that everybody agrees was a phenomenal movie, was something that they want to rush back to the theater and see a second time, a third time, and engage with it even further. And so that was my standard going in. So that might have been unfair going in. But when I sat down and watched the movie, I would say the first third of the movie, I was very locked in. Like I was very enthralled in the story. I was really engaged with where it was going. There was some mystery involved. There was a villain that I wasn't sure what was happening, and somebody pulling the strings in the background, and a lot of concepts. And the more that the movie went on, I feel like it more and more lost that tone and kind of lost where it was trying to go. It seemed kind of a little all over the place. And so when I left the theater, I would watch that movie over. I can think of 3 or 4 Marvel films that I would watch that over right now.
For sure.
So I think some of the negative reviews it's gotten, or even Rotten Tomatoes scores, like I would watch that movie over Thor: The Dark World every day of the week. Like that's I would watch that over Eternals. I would watch that over several others that I can just think of, that it was for sure I enjoyed the experience more than. And so I definitely didn't walk out feeling like I wasted my time, wasted my money, anything like that. But I did come in with really high expectations, and I did walk out still kind of wondering, like, do they know what they're doing moving forward? Like, what did they figure out what they need to change and fix, especially with these really big, important movies coming down the pike, with Fantastic Four especially, and then the big movie with Doomsday next year. Like, are they figuring out what they need to do to tweak some of these things moving forward?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it did start off pretty good, and then I think the tone is. I think they really needed to hone in on. They had a good idea. They had the perfect way to do it, and I think they kind of lost that. And I don't know how or why. I don't know if that's the writing, because I know there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 writers on here, so I wonder if rewrites played a role in tone at the end of the day. But they had the right scope, they had the right feel to it, and it kind of lost it along the way, and it didn't amount to exactly what I was hoping it would be as well. Especially since I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Sam is supposed to be the leader of the Avengers going forward. And obviously something about the Avengers was alluded to it in the movie, which again shows me that they're thinking about the future, and that the future is there, and they're like, yeah, we have to mention this stuff, but they're still, I'm like, I needed a little bit more, not even just to set up the next film, but some stuff that makes us really feel like we're heading into a direction where we understand what's happening and where we're going. So I'm with you. And I think if it was out of 5, I'd probably give it like a 2.5, 3. And probably nothing higher for me. I know Cinema Score. I don't know if have you heard of Cinema Score?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I don't know what they rated this movie though.
Yeah, they rated it B-, which is, for people that don't know, it's pretty tough. The Cinema Score, they actually they survey real audiences, I think, across the country, and this one came out as a B- score, Cinema Score, which I wonder if that's too low, because it's weird, because I can understand, like, the people that have problems with it. I can see why they have problems with it, but also it's like, I see that they have problems with it, but also it wasn't as bad as I felt like some people were making it out to be. It felt like it was just in the borderline, in the middle, where there were some things that if they could figure out, it would be a great movie or good movie or great movie. But because they couldn't figure out those things, it's for me, it just sits in the middle. And it's not like horrible or bad. And again, you said it too. I could watch. There's a few movies in the MCU where I'd watch this movie over those movies altogether.
Yeah, it definitely, like, I really like with Captain America movies. I feel like they've done a good job, and I know the Russos played a part in a couple of those with Winter Soldier and Civil War, especially, of really grounding the characters, and that's what's tricky in this universe as they introduce more and more layers and more technology, more and more powers. I feel like it makes it more difficult to keep things grounded because you're like, well, why aren't you using nanotech right now to get your suit on whenever you want it? Like, why aren't you calling in so and so? Like, why this something at this scale? Totally, like, just some of those questions where it makes it hard. And I feel like they tried to keep it grounded, but then they also led the story down a road where it almost felt really large, to where I feel like that's where it was at odds with each other sometimes, where they were trying to keep these things grounded, where there wasn't tons and tons of high tech coming into play. There weren't these big, powerful superheroes coming in to help. But some of the settings that they put the characters in, it felt like it made it really difficult to keep it grounded, which, like you were talking about with the tone, seemed like it was at odds with each other there.
Yep. What would, if you could tweak it just a little bit, what would you fix?
That's a really good question. I was getting vibes of Matt Reeves' Batman for the first third of the movie, where there's this villain in the background. They're pulling the strings. It felt like everywhere the characters went, that the villain was one step ahead of them, plotting out all these different things, and that mystery element of it. And it felt like Captain America's like the detective trying to put these pieces together. I really enjoyed that vibe and that element of the movie. And then I feel like it kind of, once we found out who the ringleader was and the villain was, I felt like it just fell apart from there. That whole and also I feel like the villain as well. I don't know how much detail you want me to get into at this point, but the villain, I felt like once we saw him, I became less and less intimidated or afraid of him. And I don't know if it was the makeup design or whatever they chose to do, because it was creepy and weird looking, but it wasn't. The best superhero movies are when you are genuinely intimidated and scared of the villain, and I have no clue what this guy's going to do, and this guy or girl is capable of so much evil stuff that I don't know what's going to happen, and having that genuine fear and unease when it comes to the villain. And as soon as they showed him on screen, it just downhill from there, all the way to the through the credits. It was just like I just had a hard time taking them as seriously. So that was a big, if there's a tweak maybe I would make, is how could you keep the villain in that puppeteer role where we keep them more intimidating. And I know they had to get to the Red Hulk elements, but it was just felt like if you could have kept us a little more afraid of the villain, that maybe that would have fueled just a little more buy-in in the storyline.
Yeah. Do you think they needed to? I noticed I don't think Sam. I mean, he was tested, but like I don't think he went through it. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like some of these superhero movies, like the hero needs to go through it. Like he needs to have a down point. And yeah, I'm not sure he had that. I mean, he had the down point kinda, but I think there are a lot. I mean, it's where the reason, or I should say where the reason is. But that's kind of my issue, is how it was executed. It was weirdly placed. I think you know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I think he needed a down moment. I think he needed to feel like, because I think he needed to feel helpless a little bit and feel like he couldn't do it, and then have this moment, which I felt like he kind of had that moment, but it was too late by that point. I feel like it was too late, storytelling wise, to really effectively produce a moment where he felt like, okay, I'm not good enough for this, etc. So, yeah, interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do wonder how much, and that's what's tricky with the movies too, because they fleshed out a lot of that inner conflict for Sam in Falcon and the Winter Soldier when it came to here he's been given this mantle of Captain America. Like how do I, like, you have asked me to follow in the footsteps of the Legend of Legends, and
Right.
how am I supposed to live up to that, and all these different variables that come into um, just the different insecurities that he had to process through
Yeah.
during that series. And so for those who hadn't seen that series, especially coming into the film, it seemed like they could have gone down that road, like you said, a little earlier, a little harder. I wonder
Yeah.
how much they were like, we really fleshed out a lot of this in the TV series. We don't want it to feel too
Like
redundant.
Yeah, right.
But those are some of the, when you start introducing TV shows, that makes it tricky.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think that might have hurt the narrative for the movie just a little bit. And then I wonder, like, maybe there's another way to play that, play that thought process, play that tension, that conflict, instead of kind of dipping into the space where we saw the TV show and all that stuff. I wonder if you can play with something different, like a different internal conflict, instead of kind of not actually rehashing the same old things, but like it feels like it's like, oh, I felt like we touched on that. That's probably why they're not diving into that. So I wonder if they could have played that differently. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now's the time for people, like, if you haven't seen it and you want to dip out, now's the time, because we're gonna get into some spoiler stuff. I want to get into all of it, so we don't have to be super vague. So let's start with let's let's go back to the villain. Let's talk about the leader. How you didn't think, you thought the way that he looked influenced, you felt like that's kind of where the movie fell off the tracks for you. And I don't know if you saw some early designs of the leader, but there's some early designs where I think even in the comics he has a bigger head. Do you think that would have added to the character, him having a bigger prosthetic or bigger head and everything like that? Because I know that they talked about CGI, but the actor Tim Blake Nelson, he didn't want to go CGI. He wanted to be practical. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I don't. That's where I'm not sure how much of it was the fact that they went for more of a practical makeup, like mutated look, as opposed to I believe I saw those pictures too, as more of like a bigger, like polished look of like definitely like still mutated, but not like we can see your brains sort of thing.
Right.
Not like your head has been like fried in a microwave sort of thing. And so that was interesting. So I don't know if it was fully how he looked or just the way that he played it off. Like, it definitely was it was cool for them to tie up some of those loose ends from the Incredible Hulk movie, to bring some of those characters back was a cool tie-in. I don't know how many people were really asking for that, as far as that goes, but I just felt like as soon as we got to that point where they're in the prison, and they're in his lab, and he reveals himself, and just all the choices that he made from then on as well just seemed I just lost that intimidation factor for whatever reason. So I'm not sure how much a CGI head would have necessarily changed that. But I lost some of that buy-in on really being the mystery behind him, and the intimidation factor just really went off a cliff after that point for me.
Do you think his actions could have helped cause that more intimidation for you? Like the things that he decided to do? I mean, the things that he decided to do are kind of, I mean, they're kind of messed up, low-key, but also I'm just like, I get it. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel scared. Do you think that could help that role? Like if you were to redo it or whatever, if Thing were to redo it, whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially when you're dealing with somebody where it is all about probabilities.
Yeah.
It just felt really random and all over the place to me, where
Yeah.
there were times where he did come out and he was like, hey, there was actually only a 12% chance you would have done what you ended up doing. But there wasn't like I guess Sam talked about it at one point, I think with Joaquin, where he's like, no, this is what he thinks we would do, so we need to keep going. But it just didn't feel like there was much creativity to that. Like, it was just kind of like lackadaisical.
Yeah.
Whereas it felt like it should have been harder to actually trick the probabilities and like really throw him off, where it seemed like they were able to do that without too much effort, which ultimately his grand plan ended up materializing in a ton of ways. So kudos to him, I guess. But it felt really random, and then he was just showing up at not random spots, but like when the guy who got the phone call about that, we all knew like, oh, there's some kind of gamma stuff in what's it, the Ross's pills.
Yeah, Ross's.
And so him showing up with the dial just randomly and in his trench coat, which just made him like just less intimidating, like, get him out of a trench coat. The trench coat just ruined it, but for me at least. But he's standing there, he's turning the dial, and he would just show up, and then he shows up at that random family's house and kills that family. And I still don't 100% get why he needed to do that. Like, I'm sure they explained it, and I just missed it, but it just felt like he's just randomly like doing these different things, and so it just really lost the traction for me.
How did you feel about his like grand plan? Like, what are your thoughts on it being the Red Hulk?
Yeah, it's an interesting full circle way to get your revenge, I guess.
Sure.
Since the gamma radiation altered his life in such a negative way, and then as they talked about all the ways that Ross used that to manipulate him in the months and years to come after that. So that's a unique way to get your revenge, is, hey, well, I'm gonna show you what gamma radiation can do, like, you better buckle up, sort of thing. And to for Ross to find himself in such a position where he had to turn to him for help, and then to do that to where you're seemingly helping him, but at a huge cost. It was an interesting way of him playing that out.
Yeah. How did you like the Red Hulk? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought the CGI looked great.
Oh yeah, bro. It's really good.
I'm trying to figure out, because I read a lot of the reviews that I saw, or even just reactions, whether it was through Twitter or whatever, where a lot of them were about, oh, there's not as much Red Hulk as you would expect. Oh, we should have had more Red Hulk. Why was it so short? And for me, I guess my question would be, like, what more did you expect to see out of a Hulk character at this point? Because we saw a cool transformation in a dramatic setting. We saw him do a thunderclap. We saw him jump all over the place. We saw plenty of smashing. So I'm at that point, like, some really cool interaction moments, like the first time he punches Sam, and his Wakandan tech like is quivering because he got hit so hard, and some of that was like, that's a creative way to show how strong he is. So for me, if they gave us another 10 minutes of Red Hulk content, I don't know what they could have really added at that point that would have been a needle mover for me, at least, of, oh, I'm so glad that they chose to show us that. Like, I feel like we, at this point, with the number of movies Hulk has been in, and we get the gist of what Hulk does for the most part. So for them, I'm sure people who are deep into the Hulk comics and stuff could tell you a dozen things that, oh, well, they could totally do X, Y, and Z. But for me, I didn't walk away feeling like we lacked Red Hulk scenes and content at that point.
Yeah, same here. I didn't think we lacked it. We lacked that at all. I saw some of those responses too, because I personally thought we would get the Hulk earlier in the film. But to see that being the final thing, I was like, oh, okay. But I also felt it. I'm not sure it felt right. You know what I'm saying? Like, as a grand finale, like, I'm I don't know how to feel about that being the grand finale, because I'm not sure it feels right for this movie, or this should have been the play. But I mean, I thought the Hawk looked cool and everything like that. The CGI was pretty good. Again, I don't like how he got Ross to not be the Hawk anymore. I don't think I liked how that was played out.
Yeah.
I felt like it was one of those things where I'm like, you would think he would, at this point, he would have to try to call for some kind of help, some kind of backup if possible, because I know everybody's scattered across the world. The Avengers aren't really a thing right now, but like, I feel like the president being the Red Hawk, and the Red Hawk running around DC is kind of a big deal, where I'm like, I think it's maybe too big for Captain America. But do you think it fit?
I think they made it work for the most part for what they were trying to do, especially with the number of other Hulk tie-ins in this movie. For whatever reason, they felt like this was their opportunity to bring a lot of those loops back around from way back when with that movie.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like it didn't fit. I agree 100% that the way that Sam is just like, well, I'm just going to have a heartfelt conversation with you, Hulk, and hopefully that brings you down. And that was pretty anticlimactic ultimately. After all of that, it's like, oh, okay, it's like, this is your version of the sun's getting real low sort of deal, where apparently that's how you emotionally connect with a Hulk, is that's how you bring them down, as you emotionally connect with them. But that's so that was anticlimactic for sure. So I think you'd have to shift so much about the rest of the movie too, if you took out the Red Hulk, and then you would lose a big promotional like carrot that they were able to hang out in front of us, something to get us excited about. So there's that element of it as well, where I think they were trying to figure out, okay, what's something that people would get excited about.
Right.
So I definitely didn't walk away being like, oh, I wish they didn't touch that storyline, or I wish they left Red Hulk out.
Sure.
I think, the way that they resolved all of it was very anticlimactic and felt way too simple after everything they had built up to at that point.
Do you think we needed the Hawk? Like, do you think we needed Bruce Banner in this, or what? Because for me, I felt like we at least needed a cameo from Bruce, because it feels weird for that to happen. And like, I mean, maybe he does respond exactly. I mean, but we don't know. But it just feels weird to see, like, there's a Red Hawk running around, and whether that's a post-credit scene, whether that's another scene, like, to see that happen and to not kind of loop in Bruce seems very interesting, you know?
Yeah, especially, I mean, now we have She-Hulk in this universe. We have, like, they looped Abomination back in with all of that. So there's lots of, I mean, if you're wanting to bring out the Hulk elements, like, there were more bullets left in the chamber as far as that went, but they chose to omit those for whatever reason. So I think those, because that is so much of the beauty of these movies, is you never know who's going to show up at any moment.
True.
And so that's back to kind of like what we were talking about, when you're trying to keep it so centralized and grounded on these characters, when the reality is we are in a universe where now we have multiple universes of universe going on. That makes it really tricky. I'm sure that's tough for them in the writer's room when they're brainstorming of who do we bring in, who do we leave out. But I wouldn't have had any issues with a Bruce Banner cameo at some point.
What are your thoughts on I think I want to pronounce her name, Shira Haas, her character. What are your thoughts on her character? I didn't care for her character. I kind of felt like, I don't know if you added in another character, a different character, but I don't know. Her character was just like, she was kind of there and being a little secretive, but wasn't really sure what she was doing. I know she's a character from the comics, but also I'm like, it didn't feel like it added much, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it felt like she could have been just a random Secret Service agent. Like
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting element that she's a widow from the Red Room and trained in the Red Room, and so that was, and then you saw her kick some tail, and you're like, okay, yeah, okay. So that was cool, but it did. I don't know enough about her character in the comics, so I don't know how much, if anybody is a fan of her character, that they felt like that was a throwaway or like a waste of her character being in the movie. So I'm not sure about that, but it just was she definitely wasn't a standout character in any way. It was just like, oh, okay, she has Black Widow training, and okay, she's helping them figure all this out.
Yeah. What about Joaquin? I loved seeing his relationship with Sam and seeing Sam be able to kind of like coach him into being the next Falcon. How did that feel for you? I thought it felt pretty cool.
Yeah. I really can't point to much acting in the film that I was like, I didn't really feel like they acted very well. Like I thought the chemistry between Sam and Joaquin was good, and I thought having that comic relief character, a character with that kind of energy, is fun. They probably could have even leaned into that a little more throughout the movie. But it was, I liked how they had those two play off of each other, especially as Joaquin is now. It's just that fun evolution of the characters. Here's Sam, who was the wingman for so long, and now like he gets to like build up his wingman, and so seeing those relationships, and that is some of that. What Steve passed on to Sam, now Sam gets to pass on to Joaquin, and some of that is cool.
Yeah, definitely. I wish though we got more Espinito. I was surprised that his role was it was small role. I was surprised it was as small as it was. I wanted more from him, with him being a great actor. I'm almost annoyed that they gave him this role, because I'm wondering if they could have gave him a bigger role in the MCU. But maybe this opens the door to see more of him down the line. Well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I think they're just trying to find as many villain roles for this guy to play as possible. And so I don't know, especially with the work he had done in with Mandalorian and some of that, where they were like, okay, let's find some way to get this guy in the MCU as well, because he does play that villain role so well. But I agree, as far as menacing or like intimidating villain characters to put in it, definitely, he felt like a side piece of the whole story, and he more so I would throw into the like, oh man, like you had your shot with Giancarlo, and you chose to, just kind of felt like a waste, or a little bit of a throwaway of that opportunity in that sense.
Yeah, I would love to see. I would love for him to show up again, even if it is that character. I would like to see him again down the line, but we'll see. We'll see. It depends on what they have for him. The fight on Celestial Island. We finally get to hear about what the Celestials appearing from the ocean. I feel like that's been a big topic since Eternals. Everybody's like, when is this going to get mentioned? Like, this is a big thing, and in most of these movies, it's not getting mentioned, and we finally get a mention about Celestial Island, and there's a fight happening on Celestial Island because of material, a special kind of material that's on this island. Adamantium. Did I say it right?
Adamantium, yeah.
Adamantium, yeah. What was your takeaways about the fight around the island? I thought that was definitely a highlight. I thought the flight design, the CGI, all that stuff was pretty cool to see. Sam in action and flight with Joaquin, and them go side by side. Like, that was pretty cool. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was for sure that first portion of the movie, like where I felt the most locked in. I remember we got to that initial scene in the White House, and Ross is walking through There's this unique element that we found, adamantium. I remember being like, "Ooh, let's go!" That's how they chose to introduce that. That's how they're bringing that into the universe. I thought that was a creative way to do that. I was all in at that point, and the fight scene, like you said, I really enjoyed. I think there maybe could have been a little more of that throughout the movie too, and part of that might be, I feel like they showed 85% of the cool tricks and stunts that they did, whether that in their costumes or like I think of Sam when he cuts the car in half, like things like that. Like they just showed all that in the trailer. So maybe that's where I was like, that wasn't, I was maybe wanting a few things to be like pleasantly surprised by of cool, like tricks through the air, or some of the ways that he used the shield to his advantage while cruising through the air. Like that was cool to see. And the way that they disarmed some of those missiles and stuff like that. So I thought, that was a really cool element, but that was one of those moments where, this scene is so huge. Like we're trying to keep war from happening with these two countries. And there's this celestial island here, and there's all these warships and missiles flying around. Like it was such a large setting where you're trying to keep these characters grounded. So that's where I felt some of that tension as well. But as far as conceptually, I was all in and thought that was a fun scene and action sequence.
Yeah, definitely. I felt the same thing. It was, when it comes to big and not being grounded, I definitely thought it was pretty big. But beyond that, it was cool to see. Just all the flight stuff. I like cool action sequences, so that was pretty cool to witness. For those that don't know what adamantium is, can you tell them what adamantium is?
Adamantium, as far as where I'm aware of it from, is made popular by the X-Men comics, and that's famously what Wolverine's claws and everything that's pumped through his body is made out of. And so it's a indestructible element and metal so I believe they said it's stronger than vibranium in the movie.
I think
so I'm not sure exactly how that plays out, but very, very strong metal. So that opens the door. So that's a nod to X-Men and Wolverine and some of that stuff, like with Miss Marvel talking about mutants coming in. They're really phasing all that stuff into the universe, which is fun.
It makes me really excited, and it also makes me, again, I just start asking those questions, like, how will we get the X-Men into the MCU? What does that look like? This is probably the second, maybe third little clue and little nod to the X-Men, and it makes me just a little excited, just to see like how this next era of the MCU. I feel like we're in this middle gap. We were in the earlier years, and we saw, Captain America, the Iron Mans, all that stuff, and we're in this middle gap, which feels very not that great, and it feels like very underwhelming. And now it feels like we're getting to this third era, this third gap, where we'll see the X-Men, we'll see like even Fantastic Four, more of these characters start to come into play. How does that make you feel, like, as we continue to look to the future?
Yeah, this is something I'd be interested in your take on, thinking about this moving forward, because I think it's a lot of fun to forecast, and especially with some of the things they've dropped of what's coming with Doomsday, with Secret Wars. Very interesting, cool storylines are coming. Fantastic Four is especially the trailer that dropped. There's a lot of excitement for that. But I guess my question for you would be, with all the movies we've seen up to this point, like who do you think, like what characters would you say are like beloved by people at this point? Like what characters left alive in the universe would you say people really love?
Yeah, that's a good question. Easily Spider-Man. I think everybody loves Spider-Man, whether you watch the movies or not. Because even when people hadn't been watching like the shows, they showed up for No Way Home because everybody knew that the three were going to show up together and they're going to fight together. So definitely Spider-Man. I'd say maybe Captain America. I think people like Sam Wilson. I think they think that he's a good character for sure. maybe Thor. Maybe Thor gets in there somehow. I do think that's the struggle right now. Me and my wife had a full-on conversation about this. We weren't arguing, but we were kind of debating because
Come on.
she used to be super into the Marvel movies. So after she watched Infinity War. Infinity War was the first movie she ever saw, and she was like, "Wait a second, what's all this stuff? What's going on?" And so she went back with one of her best friends, and they rewatched all of them to prepare for Endgame.
Oh, so
and then
fun.
and then she got the chance to watch Endgame when everybody else did when it first came out, and like she was a part of that whole little train and stuff. But since then, she's kind of floated away, and so we were talking about it, and she's like, I don't care for a lot. There's too many characters, and I don't care for a lot of these characters unless it's like Spider-Man, or actually that's probably it. I think that's all the characters she cared for. But like, there's not many characters that she feels like she can connect with right now that are like left alive. I mean, Scarlet Witch. I think there's a big Scarlet Witch fan base out there. But beyond that, I'm like really thinking about it. I'm like, I don't know if there's many of these characters right now, like that are really, really beloved. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was interested to hear your take on where you would rank Sam Wilson now and as Captain America. Like he would probably be on the borderline for me. I think people could probably go either way on him.
For sure.
Spider-Man is for sure. I agree. I think Thor after Love and Thunder, people are a little more. It doesn't seem like he has that same aura about him anymore, that same mystique about him. But so there's that. I think Peter Quill is a beloved character
That's
still
true.
He's still. That's what I had to really think. I was like, oh, they said he's going to be featured in more movies. So if he shows up, like people, I think would be excited to see him. But outside of that,
what about Bucky? Maybe.
Bucky's another one that I think, I think it was cool even seeing him show up in this movie and for them getting to have that
little moment,
like you were talking about, that low moment that we definitely needed for him to have. So that was so you're looking at maybe 5 characters, like if you wanted to throw in Bruce Banner still as Hulk, maybe, but especially out of the new characters that they've introduced the past 4 or 5 years, I just don't think of I don't think anybody has Shang-Chi on that list, She-Hulk on that list. And I'm just trying to think of people even who are likely to show up in Doomsday at some point. Like I can't point to many where I would say because that was part of what made Infinity War and Endgame and even Civil War and some of the first Avengers film is, we're going to get to see these characters come together. That's going to be, we get to see Rocket Raccoon interact with all these different characters, and we get to see we got to see Doctor Strange and Tony Stark sassing each other back and forth. Like those are things we were so excited about, and then the payoff was so awesome. And so that's what makes me a little nervous about these big films where they're bringing all the characters in again, is how many team ups are people actually really looking forward to?
Yeah.
How many people are like, I can't wait to see these characters interact. My hope is that Thunderbolts gives us 1 or 2 of those characters that even though we've already seen all of them, maybe they get some momentum. Hopefully the Fantastic Four gets us excited about seeing them interact in some different ways. But I think that's probably a main pressure point for the team as they're writing and crafting these films, is how do we get people invested in all these characters coming together? Because I don't know if they've done enough groundwork to really get us super excited about many of them.
Yeah, and even thinking about it, because we have Thunderbolts in May, Fantastic Four July, and then we got a few shows here and there, and then eventually we're gonna be on Doomsday. Do you think it's too late? Do you think they're just at a point now where it's just let's try to craft the best story that we possibly can, and hope that people will show up And, thinking about it, because from that standpoint, as we just had this start naming characters, you've gotta wonder, like, when marketing comes, like, who do you market? Who is at the forefront? Like, obviously we know Robert's returning and he's being Dr. Doom, and so I can see definitely Dr. Doom being a part of that marketing endeavor. But, like, more Spider-Man now, or do they push Spider-Man more? Do they push Sam more, Thor more, maybe even Carol more because she's Brie Larson, she's a name? But even then, it's like tough, almost slim pickings, because it's like you wonder, will people care about these characters, when that movie comes? So what do you think? Do you think I kind of, like, now after talking about it and really diving into it, I'm like, it feels like it's too late, and it feels like they're at this point where it's just like, let's try to wrap this up the best we can, and then we go into another era, which who knows what that'll look like, and we'll plan differently going forward. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I hope it's not too late. I would love to see them stick this landing with these next several films and cap out another phase on a high note. That'd be awesome. It did, as much as I love everything the Russo brothers have done in the MCU up to this point.
Yeah.
It just felt like getting the Russo brothers and bringing back Robert Downey Jr. just felt like it gave a little bit of a vibe off to me of nothing we're doing is working. Let's go back to the well and let's bring back everyone's favorite actor, or like most people's favorite character and actor. And then let's bring back everybody's favorite directors that we've had so far. And let's see if that stirs up some of the magic again. And that's where I don't know if that's maybe them realizing, what draws do we really have to this film with what we've built and what we've established, and the number of characters that people are actually really, really invested in. Are they like, let's bring back RDJ and put him as Dr. Doom, and that'll get people in the seats to see how the heck they're going to do this and pull that all together. So that might have just been a little bit of a, hey, here's a Hail Mary we're going to throw and see if it pays off to build some excitement for the movie. I really hope that Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four are awesome, and that they build some really good momentum for everybody getting excited about next year's movie. But I'm a little skeptical at this point. We'll see.
I know. I do think the way that I've seen the marketing behind Fantastic Four so far, with the whole hype launch trailer type thing, I think this past weekend they had an IMAX. IMAX has this countdown that they usually play before movies start, and it was a Fantastic Four themed countdown, which you don't see a lot. And I could be wrong. I don't go to the IMAX often, but I just saw people post about it. I think Marvel's really pushing. Like, again, I think this is it's kind of like what you said. They're going back to the well. We're going to go back to the things that work. And then they're going, okay, as we go back to the things that work, we need to prepare for after Secret Wars. What does that look like? Well, the first family needs to be one of the faces, right? One of the four faces of that next era. A part of that, what X-Men will eventually come into play. So I think I could, like, as we look to July, like, I think we should be aware of the marketing and see how they play this, because already I'm getting vibes where I'm like, this is different. Like, I think they're putting there's enough juice behind this where they're like really pushing this to be that next big film to get people not just excited about these Avenger movies, but even beyond, because I bet we'll get a lot of stories with these characters, because I mean they're a big part of the comics for people that I don't know. But I can already just feel and sense and even see some of the marketing that they're doing with this film. I'm like, they're marketing this different than they have Thunderbolts, or they have Captain America, or even that they had Deadpool, Wolverine, and maybe even the rest of the slate before. So I think it's so interesting. I don't know if that's because I'm excited about the movie, but I'm like, they don't usually just do IMAX countdowns. It's an IMAX countdown with the theme of the movie, and it says the movie's coming out this day. Nothing about the characters, nothing about anything. It's just, it really seems like they're really going all in and like, we got to push this movie. And I don't know, we got to push this movie. What if they actually believe that this movie is like actually solid and we're gonna get a really good product? So
Yeah, that's even, I do wonder too. We talked about earlier about how the feedback they were getting, they realized things weren't working, and with how far along they already were in the Cap movie and in Thunderbolts, like how much of that was it's kind of too late to really shift the things we would need to feel like we need to make this better. Like that's, I'm just thinking through best case scenarios at this point. Like they were almost a little too far in the process to really shift things around when it came to that.
Right.
And they didn't want to completely shift the movies around. So that's because they definitely still, like, they have cards to play, especially with the characters they still have rights to. And like the X-Men, there are so many different story arcs you can go through with so many different characters. People would show out for a Miles Morales storyline. Like they can take that route with Spider-Man. They can Fantastic Four, X-Men. There's countless other characters that they could get some hype around. And so that they can use, especially when you're introducing all these other worlds, all these other universes into the fold. There's so many different things that they can do that are creative and fun. And like you said, even if they wanted to, in a sense, reset the universe, and where the Fantastic Four is that foundational piece of what this next wave of movies is going to look like, I'm all about it, all for it.
Have you read Secret Wars?
I never have. No, I understand the gist of it, and I've read some comics that like were impacted by that and reference it or allude to it in different points, but I've never actually read that storyline. How about you?
I started. I have it. I just haven't finished it, but I have to do that this year. And I think I have to do that this year. I kind of see, since you kind of already know the gist for people that don't know, I kind of see where they're going with this. And I think that's kind of where they were headed with King or without King. But I think I think where they're headed. I can see where they're headed after reading that comic. I can kind of see where they're headed. So, and yeah, I agree. They do have cards to play because, I mean, again, if they can rally a solid good 2 Avenger films, if they can rally those 2 movies and put out a good product, I mean, I don't care how crappy this whole multiverse saga was. I'll be overjoyed that they were able to bring some kind of cool story. And maybe this is kind of my inference, is maybe these Avenger films are preluding to the future in a way. Like, yes, it's ending the multiverse saga, but what if this, because it's Doctor Doom, and again, not sure how they're going to play Doctor Doom, but Doctor Doom, I mean, my guy's a big bad. So I feel like if they play their cards right and kind of logistically do this well, it could really be a cool payoff. It could be, man, we could be sitting there after Doomsday going, oh man, give me Secret Wars. Give me Secret Wars. You know what I'm saying? So
yep, for sure. That's you would think that's towards the top of their list of what their goals are for that movie, is how can we make people feel similarly to that year between Infinity War and Endgame, which I don't know how you replicate that much of a cliffhanger, but if there's any way that you can get even remotely close to making people so excited to see Secret Wars a year later, I really hope that they're able to pull it off. Russo brothers have done a really great job with everything they've done, and so I'm hopeful that they actually were all in on doing this, and it wasn't like they were just paid so much money that they couldn't say no. So I'm hoping it was at least majority which they had mentioned in the past that was a movie they would come back for. But that's some of my skepticism of like, how much did they have to pay Robert Downey Jr. and the Russo brothers to come back, and just some of those different things to pull them out to hopefully give them a knockout movie again. So we'll see. I'm hopeful, man.
And I honestly think I think the Russo brothers kind of need this because I think the projects outside of like Endgame and Infinity War haven't really hit at the level that I think people were hoping that they would achieve since after these movies. So I think they probably paid them a lot of money, but I also think the Russo brothers saw this at the opportunity of going, hey, we kind of need something to really work for us. And also they're big comic book guys too. Like I think they really like the comics. So I think this could be really good. This could be really good. I don't know, man. We'll see.
Yeah. Nobody has juggled so many characters in one movie so well. I mean, there's nothing even really you can compare it to, but they've out of any team up movie we've had, I mean, James Gunn did well with all the Guardians, but that's a smaller established team. So when you have movies and movies worth of characters coming together and juggling them in the way that they staged fight scenes, and where that's what I appreciate so much, whether it was the airport scene in Civil War or the fight in Wakanda or the fight in Endgame, the big portals battle at the end, was how they staged, where every time that they showed one set of characters, they made it very clear that all the other characters were still off fighting somewhere, and like you'd even see them flashing in the background, like they mapped it out that way, and I just always really appreciated that. And so I'm interested to see when you're throwing in some of these new characters, and especially when you get to the concept of worlds and universes of different versions of the characters. Like that's definitely the big draw of Secret Wars, is the opportunity to not just take beloved characters and have them fight each other, but have dozens and dozens of versions of your beloved characters fighting each other. It's going to be pretty cool to see how they choose to go into that.
Yep. It'll be interesting indeed, man. Interesting indeed. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, again, it was great to be in the movie theater watching Marvel content. We still got 2 more movies this year that I'm super pumped about, but we're still a ways away when it comes to the movies of me not showing up to put my butt in the seat and at least watch and see, and I'll keep supporting for as long as I for the foreseeable future at least. And I'm hoping for many more good memories to come.
I'm right there with you, bro. Like I don't care if the movie is mediocre or flat out bad. I will be there for MCU products here on out, and I'll be there on a Thursday night, Lord willing. Thursday nights, if not, then I'm going to see it Friday. Like I will be there watching these stories because I've been here, I've been invested. I've watched just about, I think, all of them. So I'm not going anywhere at this point. Just going to keep watching and enjoying the content that comes. You know what I'm saying? Have you watched Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man?
I haven't gotten to yet. I'm really excited to dive into it. I've heard really good things.
Oh, bro. Especially since Spider-Man is your favorite hero. I think you'll love it. I think you'll love it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm everything I've seen about it and heard about it makes me really excited to dig into it.
Good. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining the Real Table Podcast today. Obviously, we're going to get you back on here. We got to keep bringing you back on this. So, bro, thank you so much just for being a part of this podcast, man.
Absolutely. This was such a treat for me, and I love geeking out about this stuff and talking about this. This is so much fun chatting with you, and I appreciate you. Yeah,
no problem, bro. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. If you haven't seen Captain America Brave New World, go check it out. Also, like, subscribe, share this podcast with anybody that you know that likes movies, likes Marvel, whatever. Share that podcast. And I will see you guys really soon. Peace. Once again, thank y'all so much for joining me today on the Real Table Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and even comment. I want to hear your thoughts and I want to hear your opinions. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Real Table Pod and on Twitter at The Real Table. And don't forget to also check me out on therealtable.com for news, articles, and reviews. I will see y'all soon. Peace.